In the Bible, there are certain words that pop up again and again and again, which might come across as redundant. Like I know a few verses in the scriptures that wouldn't satisfy an English teacher, for example, because they're so redundant. And you might think, well, can't the author mix it up a little bit? Can't they pick different words? And I'm sure they could, but the fact is that repetition in the Bible is meant to teach us something. So if you see a word that happens over and over again, it's because the author is trying to give us a clue that that word or that concept is important. And one of the words in Scripture, in the New Testament anyways, that appears over and over and over again is the word stay or the word remain. So both are interchangeable. And the reason is because the attitude of staying or remaining is essential for Christians. It's hugely important. So whether it's pushing through a tough season in a person's life or sticking with a commitment that they've made, or maybe staying or remaining in a time of prayer. So say a person has carved out a half an hour for themselves to pray, and they look at their watch and they're getting to 25 minutes and they think, well, that's good enough, I can cut it short. So the concept of staying or remaining is huge in the Bible. And we know this concept is of God, so to speak, because every person in the Bible who made a bad move began with a failure to stay or remain in the presence of God. So think of the first person to do this, or the first two people, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. When they sinned, they failed to remain in the presence of God. Scripture says they hid themselves and removed themselves from God's presence. You know, part of me thinks that God could have dealt with the sin of Adam and Eve quicker and easier. We'll never know because they removed themselves from his presence, which in some ways is just as bad. I'll leave that for, the theologians to work out, but bad move, removing yourself from the presence of God, failing to remain in the presence of God. Who else in the Bible failed to remain? Well, someone like St. Peter. He ended up denying Christ existed, and how did that whole thing come to a head? It began with a failure to stay awake in the Garden of Gethsemane and pray, to stay awake and pray with Christ. So again, staying or remaining, very important concepts in the Bible, very important concepts when it comes to following Christ. So as we come to the end of the Christmas season, which by the way is not yet, we still have a few more days left. We've got the wise men and Mary, Mother of God to go, so there's good things to come still. But as we come to the end of the Christmas season, try thinking of some ways of having the spirit of Christmas remain with you or stay with you. So here's an idea that I learned from a former pastor of mine. Leave a Christmas decoration out for the whole year. So one of the things that you've got out right now, a Christmas decoration, leave it up. It doesn't have to be anything huge, like your Christmas tree. You don't want your neighbors, you don't want people walking by your house, looking in your window, thinking you're weird. So don't do that. Pick something small. And I don't mean the elf on the shelf, but something meaningful. Something that reminds you of the true meaning of Christmas, and by extension, the true meaning of life, what life is really all about. All for the purposes of staying or remaining in the presence of God.